To keep your microphones on mute during the presentation to avoid unnecessary background noise. Please note that this lecture is being recorded for documentation purposes, and this plenary session is being streamed in YouTube. We would like to encourage everyone to participate in our discussion by typing in your questions, comments, or reactions through Slido. Instructions on how to do that will be provided once we get to the open forum portion of the program. In addition, before we end the meeting, we would be requesting our participants, if at all possible, to turn on your respective cameras for a group photo. Now, moving on with our program, I would like to introduce our plenary speaker. Dr. Michael Prieler is a professor in the Multimedia School at Halim University in South Korea. He has been a visiting professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, USA, and at City University of Hong Kong. His research focuses on advertising, health communications, new media, and diversity in the media, particularly on representations of gender, race, ethnicity, and age. He has published in a variety of international journals on this topic, including Mass Communication and Society, Journalism and Mass Communications Quarterly, International Communication Gazette, Telematics and Informatics, Telecommunications Policy, Sex Roles, the Social Science Journal, and the International Journal of Cultural Studies, among others. In addition, he has co-authored the book, Advertising in the Aging Society, Understanding Representations, Practitioners, and Consumers in Japan, published by Palgrave Macmillan in 2016. To give his talk entitled Social Media Representations and Emotions, let us give a warm welcome to Dr. Michael Prieler.
Okay, thank you so much for the nice introduction. I will try to share my screen now.
Yes, we're able to see your desktop.
Okay. Okay, I think now it should be fine.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you so much for attending my speech on social media representations and emotions today. Thank you also for the organizers for inviting me to this conference. And in the beginning, I would like to mention that I'm not a geographer, but a media and communication studies scholar. Nevertheless, I hope that there will be some interesting points in this presentation for the audience, since I think this topic is very relevant to all of us. So let's start with the outline of the presentation, so what you can expect in the next maybe 20 to 30 minutes. So first, I will give a brief overview about social media today, which will provide some data on social media. Then I will speak about what is representation. I will speak about old media versus new media. And then I will speak about celebrities and influencers, about non-celebrities, effects of social media representations, and in the end, I will give a brief conclusion. So let's start with social media today. If you look at this graph here, what you can see is a very clear increase of social media users worldwide over the last decade, and it's estimated certainly to further increase over the next years. If we look at the most popular social media, Facebook is still dominating, at least based on most data. There are also differences in different providers. Other big players are YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram. Recent data shows that users are on average approximately 2.5 hours per day on social media, which is a substantial amount. In line with social cognitive theory, one can argue that media users might learn something directly or indirectly during that time. So before analyzing now what representations users encounter on social media, let's speak a bit about what is actually representation. So what is representation? There are certainly many definitions. I just picked two here. The first one is a very famous one by Stuart Hall, and he wrote, representation is the process by which members of a culture use language, broadly defined as any system which deploys signs, any signifying system, to produce meaning. So does this presentation will analyze what meanings are produced on social media. On the next slide, I have a longer definition by myself, which I contributed to the SAGE International Encyclopedia of Mass Media and Society. So I'm writing here, representation is the construction of aspects of reality, for example, people, places, events in a medium, and can take various forms such as speech, writing, images, and moving pictures. Representations always involve a construction or version of reality rather than reality itself. In other words, the producer of the media is not able to depict every aspect of reality and can only represent portions of reality by making choices about how to portray something or someone in the media. Thus, our information is also restricted and might be distorted. So we must also keep these choices and potential distortion in mind when thinking about representations on social media. So next, let's think a bit about the differences between so-called old or traditional media or mass media versus new media, and how these differences affect also representation. I just picked some characteristics that are important for representation. And what you see here is old media is so-called passive, new media is active. That means we act as consumers, basically passive in old media. We watch television, but we don't do much ourselves. We're just lazy sitting in front of the TV. While in the case of new media, we can actively contribute something in case we want to do that. Also in old media, there's basically no interaction. I mean, we can shout on the TV or something, but there will not come any reaction back, basically. And in contrast, new media is interactive. We have at least the option, doesn't mean that we use it, but we have the option actually to answer back, to write comments, or even produce our own content. This is the third point. So in the case of old media, there's a division between producer and consumer. In the case of new media, there's a collapse of the division between consumers and producers. Consumers also produce own media content, or at least they have the option to do so. So these differences are also relevant to the representation on social media. So has representation changed? So from old media to social media. Basically what changed is from representation to at least the option of self-representation. You can represent yourself, not just other people represent you, but you can represent yourself. As a result of being active producers on social media, the main difference between social media and old media is self-representation, which we will focus on in the following. However, this is not to deny that there are also representations by traditional media existing on social media, which are not self-representations, but we focus in this talk today on self-representations. So the question is, are self-representations the promised land? Does it really lead to an improvement? There have been a lot of complaints about representation in the mass media, for example, about stereotypical mass media representations such as men are breadwinners, women stay at home, women are sexualized, older people are frail and underrepresented, minority groups are underrepresented and depicted negatively, and so on. In its beginnings, the internet and related technologies have been hailed as avenues for personal expression and promoting citizens' activity. Similarly, one might assume that self-representation leads to more equal representation of social groups on social media. Everybody has access and everybody is free to represent themselves. There are no gatekeepers and powerful groups dictating what is represented and what is not represented. So let's see now if this optimistic view is actually the case. So I look mainly on two groups, how they represent themselves. One group is celebrities and influencers, and the other group is non-celebrities, so probably most of us. So while there are many aspects related to representation, due to these time restrictions, I will especially focus on a particularly important area, which is body image issues and beauty on social media, which is very dominant, particularly when we think about Instagram, for example. So let's start with celebrities and influencers. How are they represented, or how they represent themselves? So these are the people with the most followers on Instagram worldwide in May 2022. And we can clearly see here that these representations are closely connected with beauty, and the types of beauty are rather limited. Men are clearly athletic, and particularly for women, beauty plays an important role. Women are also highly dominant in terms of numbers. 7 out of 10 of the top 10 are basically women here. In the case of the Philippines, the picture is even stronger, with women clearly dominating. The top 5 are all women, and all of them are actresses, models, singers, which again shows the importance of beauty on social media, and particularly on Instagram. An interesting observation in terms of desired beauty is also that 3 out of the top 5 are mixed Filipina. Thus, it is even more questionable whether the audience could ever be able to follow the presented beauty ideals. So these are the top 5 here, and these are the remaining in the top 10, which are also mostly women. So, however, these celebrities and influencers are not already beautiful enough. They also further enhance themselves by using programs such as Photoshop. So we give you one example. You can see she's basically slimming her face. And another example here, this is maybe not obvious, but if you look at the frame here of the door, I marked it here in red, you can see there was something done with the photo, obviously, otherwise this frame would not be so strange. So obviously there was also some photoshopping taking place. In case of travels, this is also something that is often highlighted by celebrities to travel to many locations around the world. So celebrities certainly also play an important role in introducing locations to us, and maybe that's of interest to geographers, which become part of our fantasies and dreams. So the lifestyle of celebrities are envied by a lot of followers. So locations here are, for example, here the first one is the National Museum of National History in Manila, the Philippines. We have Seoul here in Korea. We have Tokyo, Japan. And here we have San Francisco in the US, Italy, UK. So these images in these foreign locations are highly staged and framed. So it's questionable whether one might find such picture-perfect images when oneself would visit this location. Here we have France, Thailand, Vietnam. So in these ways, also different locations are presented to the social media audiences who might envy these celebrities for their lifestyles or aspire to also go to these locations. And as this we will further discuss actually in the following slides, this envy and different types of envy when we speak about possible effects of these representations. Finally, there's a new type of celebrity. Here's one example, that's Rosie. Rosie is a Korean virtual avatar and influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers. There are also such virtual celebrities with millions of followers. So what does it mean to our experience when Instagrammers are virtual and not human beings anymore? These created avatars can take on any form and looks, but most likely they will also conform to the media's beauty standards and even more promote an unrealistic beauty ideal. However, in addition to celebrities, also friends play a role in our feelings about lives and our own bodies. There is, in fact, even research suggesting that images of friends have an even stronger effect, since in the case of celebrities, We know that they're living in a different world, and thus we do not compare ourselves so much with them. So friends also only show the best side on social media. We see something like that. So when we compare ourselves waking up in the morning and looking in the mirror, and we might look like that, and then see these best photos of our friends, we might not compare well with them. While also friends might not look like that when they wake up in the morning, they also follow the general beauty norms and try to adapt in order to get as much attention and likes as possible. Nobody is putting an image online he or she thinks is unattractive or uninteresting. But what is that doing to our emotions and feelings? That's the question, and we will try to answer that in a couple of slides. So despite the choices we theoretically have when we are using self-representation, we're all caught in a system of representation ideals in our culture and society. We want likes and positive comments and thus follow well-established success stories and representation from celebrities and influencers and become our own strict gatekeeper of what gets posted. Either consciously or subconsciously, we are our own PR firm. We are our own media producers and look at ourselves as a product and try to create posts with the most reactions. So what are the representational techniques that are used on social media to attract attention? One of these techniques is framing. We only focus on what we want to present, basically, as you can see very strongly in this cropped picture here, basically. Another way is posing like celebrities. In this way, we follow recipes of success on social media. So we see here, for example, how to pose for Instagram-worthy beach photos, an article in a website, or 7 Korean Instagram photo tips that will give your feed a Korean celebrity vibe. However, we actually do not even need this advice. We learn throughout our whole lives what poses are related to success and what men or women must do to attract attention and to be liked. This is a particularly strong example of using filters. A Japanese man had a Twitter account targeting bikers and uses filters so that he looks like a beautiful young woman rather than an older man that he's in reality. So this on the right side is him, and on the other side, that's his filter, basically. So here is how he looks afterwards. There are also beauty challenges on social media. I just give some examples here of China. And these beauty challenges further reinforce some beauty trends. All of these challenges support a certain beauty ideal, in this case, is particularly of being slim. So we have here a belly button challenge, a coin challenge, an underboob pen challenge, an A4 waist challenge, an iPhone 6 challenge, lipstick challenge, and so many others. Again, all reinforcing some certain expectations about our bodies. However, I should want to mention that this projection of a perfect world does not stop with body image and beauty, but also affect many other parts of representation in our lives. For example, relationships, so what's shown in Facebook or in other social media and what's in real, or also kids, also social media versus reality. But also travels are covered in posts by non-celebrities on social media. Here's, for example, my own post during my sabbatical in Hong Kong. So you see beautiful beaches and what else. But as always, we kind of exclude the maybe negative sides, what also exist in any place. So we show photos of the best food, the nicest holiday locations, the funniest parties, the most romantic partner, the cutest kids, and so on. But we do not find much about everyday real life, such as boring work, stressful vacations with a lot of rain, quarreling partners, and so on. So where does this all lead us to? That's the question. Our own reality cannot compete with these selections of the best and most exciting moments of other people's lives. And we might become unhappy about our own lives. And that's something I want to speak a bit more about in the following slides, when I speak about research that shows us effects of social media representations. There's only been more research on effects of social media in the case of body image perceptions during the last 5 years, surprisingly. When I wrote an article in 2014 on the topic, there have been nearly no studies yet. But now, actually, we already know quite a lot about the topic and also about social media effects in general. So not just about body image, but general effects. So let's summarize. One scholar did this very well here. He summarized previous findings in the following way. So he looked at many different studies and he summarized basically what these studies said. So he found negative relationships between passively using social network sites and subjective well-being. So what does this mean? If you just passively use social media, the more you use it, the more unhappy you become, basically. So passive use provokes social comparison and envy, which has negative consequences on subjective well-being. In contrast, positive relationships between actively using social network sites and subjective well-being. So this means if you actively use it, then this might have a positive effect on your well-being or happiness. Active use predicts subjective well-being. It seems to do so by creating social capital and stimulating feelings of social connectedness. So let's start with some effects here, more concrete. And I start with a positive effect. There are more negative ones, as we will see later on. One positive effect can be emotional contagion. What does it mean? People take over the emotions displayed by others, especially close others, like friends. So they post something happy and you become happy. That's basically the idea here. And the same was found in a study by Lin and Utz in 2015. So what you see here is, this is how close the relationship is. And the closer the relationship, the stronger the emotion is. So happiness, if happiness is posted, it's the strongest then. The contagion is strongest with the closest friends. But there's also negative emotions that is also the strongest with close friends. Some envy. Here we have envy and we have other envy. There's benign envy and malicious envy. Benign envy, as I will show in the next slide, is more positive. It actually motivates you to try to reach the same goal, while malicious envy is quite negative. This is how we normally think about envy. So let's look at the next slide to explain that a bit further. Browsing Facebook is associated with slightly elevated feelings of envy. This is no surprise. We try to compare ourselves often and then we envy these people. So envy is a negative emotion that arises when another person lacks another superior quality, achievement, or possession, and either desires it or wishes that the other lacked it. And again, as I previously mentioned, there are mainly two types. One is benign envy, which motivates people to work harder toward reaching the envied object or state. And there's malicious envy. The focus is on the envied person and is characterized by wishing ill to the envied person. So they are very different, basically. Another mostly leading to negative outcomes is social comparison, which is very important in the context of social media. Social comparison theory states that individuals have a natural drive to compare themselves with others for self-evaluation purposes. Such comparisons with beautiful images on social media from celebrities, influencers, and friends lead to body dissatisfaction because the beauty ideal on social media is unattainable for the majority of people. Research has shown that social comparison on social media leads to negative body esteem. Beyond body image issues, it might also lead, so social comparison might also lead to dissatisfaction with our lives. So we compare the lives with our partners, with our kids, with our jobs, basically with our whole life. The next one I want to speak about is called internalization as an effect of social media. So based on social cognitive theory, we learn from the media. This leads to the internalization of beauty ideals and other distorted realities. People take beauty ideals from social media as the standard and norm and try to follow these. The same might be true also for other distorted realities on social media. So subsequently, we compare these internalized ideals with our own life. And mostly, again, we will be quite unhappy with our own lives because there's an ideal world presented on social media. The next one I want to speak about is objectification. In order to compare ourselves with others, we also observe and thus objectify ourselves. Based on these observations and comparisons, we treat ourselves like an object, self-objectification, and mold ourselves into the best possible product for social media likes and reactions. In addition, due to the strong emphasis on beauty and its internalization, we also treat others as objects and bodies. And last but not least, I want to speak about another serious issue, which is addiction and depression. So some scholars argue that posting and reactions are becoming an addiction. So what you see here by Kotler, the social media dopamine loop. First, the social media, you perform on the social media an action, like you write something, share something, post something, or you comment, and then you wait for a reaction, like a like and a comment. I think most of us know this feeling. If there's no likes, you feel like, oh, there must be a problem with the platform or something. So we get kind of stressed about it. And ideally, we get some likes, and that's like a reward. And then we, as a result, we post again and wait for the next reward and post again and wait for the next reward. So it's becoming like an addiction. But the question is, what happens when there are not enough likes or responses? And this might lead to depression, stress, and anxiety. So again, as I said, I think most of us experience this. We think we post something very exciting, but then nobody likes it or very few people like it, and we are wondering what's going on. There has been actually a strong increase of female, particularly female adolescents suffering with depression in the United States. If you look at this graph here, you can see this was particularly around, in the case of men, there was not so a clear tendency, but in the case of women, it started around 2010, 2011. And that coincides with the start of the smartphone. So this is probably no coincidence. And there has been also research to really analyze the hours a day screen media used and depression symptoms. And again, for women, it was found that the more medias, the more screen time they have, the more they depressed they get. And that's particularly true for social media and also for gaming. So let's conclude now. So while there are some positive effects of consuming social media content, like emotional contagion, that means some people become happier seeing happy content, social media consumption also includes many negative effects, for example, on body image. Earlier studies on the effects of social media on body image found a correlation between general social media use and body dissatisfaction-related outcomes. However, newer studies differentiating between social media found only correlations when users engaged in appearance-oriented social media use. That means not texting or something, but basically posting images or consuming images. Appearance-oriented social media is associated with body dissatisfaction-related outcomes, such as thin ideal internalization, weight dissatisfaction, drive for thinness, self-objectification, and eating disorders. Thus, some social media like Instagram might lead to more problematic outcomes than others. So self-representation seemed an opportunity for more equal and diverse representations on social media. Everybody can represent themselves on social media, which leads to some form of inclusion of minority groups. For example, people with disabilities or older people can find a platform on social media. In addition, activists, for example, the body positive movement, can have a voice. Thus, everybody can find like-minded people on social media. At the same time, hate speech and negative representation circulate unfiltered on social media, targeting also minority groups. So overall, there have not been big representational changes, interesting. Despite our choices with self-representations often follow traditional, successful representation from mass media, including stereotyping and self-objectification. For example, women are also strongly self-objectifying and sexualizing themselves on social media. Beauty and sex sells, that's already an advertising slogan, but it's also true for social media. We construct images of ourselves which we regard as most successful to attract attention, likes, and reactions. We post what seems most exciting and interesting. Every means seems justifiable for the ultimate goal of likes. Thus, also self-representations are often highly distorted and often with problematic effects on the audience. Okay, thank you so much for your attention. And these are the references. And I will be happy to receive some questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prieler, for sharing your research and also insights on self-representations. And it's really interesting to hear about all the effects of social media, whether it's on the positive side, a little bit of that, and also its effects on the negative side as well. So now we're going to proceed to our open forum. As we have done in the panel sessions earlier, we will be using Slido to facilitate the question and answer portion of the program. I would like to invite our dear participants to either scan the QR code as shown in the slide deck, or you can open your preferred browser to go to slido.com and then type in our official hashtag, which for this plenary session is #representations. Of course, if you're not used to using Slido yet, you can always still use the chat box in the Zoom meeting, or you can raise your hand so that we can call on you, unmute, and we can have more interactions in this discussion. So while waiting for some of the questions from the participants, I'm just wondering, Dr. Prieler, if in your research you've come across some of the effects also of self-representations, especially during the upcoming holidays. Because I'm thinking, on a regular day, this is what happens, this is how we feel. But for some people, holidays could be especially stressful, and does it change when we see all these things in social media? Does it have further effects on our self-representation as well?
Okay, thank you so much. That's an interesting question. Honestly speaking, I did not come across a research on that particular issue, but maybe now thinking about it, it sounds a very interesting topic actually. But my general guess is situation will be similar. So that means I think actually holidays, I don't know in Philippines, but in many other countries, they are a bit famous that everybody wants it perfect, which often leads then to some quarrels or something like that. But I think the same as in other situations, that's probably nothing we will share to the public, and we will again share the happy moments, and we will share the happy family and how happy the children are to get the presents, while in reality maybe they wanted something else. So I think in that sense probably the holidays are not so different, except maybe that the expectations from our side are even higher. And when we ourselves came maybe from some issues, especially when the multiple generations are meeting, which maybe we also don't do all the time, which also leads maybe sometimes to small conflicts. And when we come from that out and then we finish our holiday, and then in the evening we look in the social media and everybody seems to have a perfect event again, while you yourself, maybe yours was not so perfect, then this might be maybe in the end of the day leading to a very similar outcome. But I think most of us also know, I mean, it's not that we are not aware of that. We also know that everybody, or most people at least, sharing the positive events. So in that sense, I think the risk that everybody gets depressed now is also limited. Again, when we speak about this, I mean, it's statistically significant, but nevertheless, it applies to a relatively small amount of people.
Right. Okay, so Oh, we have our first question that came in. So first question is, can representations represent another representation? This is kind of like Inception, huh? And does this manifest in media, particularly in social media? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure now what it means, but
Yeah. I don't know how to
maybe
rephrase it too.
okay. I guess it's kind of a post of a post or something like that. Yeah, also somehow. I mean, sometimes we also often like in, again, I'm not 100% sure what it refers to, but when I hear this, what comes to my mind now is like when we repost something or when we use some other people's sources, so not our own content, but when we reuse some of the existing content, which is basically other person's representation. Also in that case, I think we are kind of selective. And we maybe not even consciously, but we have some kind of intention behind it. We find it interesting, we want to share it, or whatever our motivations are. So in that sense, certainly this also happens, I would say, yeah. But as I said, I'm not 100% sure what was the exact question, so I hope I could answer it a bit. Okay, let's see the next one.
Yeah, I actually see that Wilfred Lucas, the one who posted the question, sent an emoji. I was just wondering, Wilfred, if you're willing to open or unmute your microphone, maybe you can give a little bit more context on your question, if you want to do that, so that maybe Dr. Prieler can give a little bit more insights on your question. Maybe not. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Anyway,
That's
we
fine.
tried to answer a bit, and there's a second
Yes.
question also by the person I see. So
Yes.
anyway, let's go to the next one first. I'm interested on your thoughts on viral videos on social media that are
So it's
staged like
a
plain
comment.
text
Yes.
to garner the. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I think this kind of viral videos. I mean, there's no real recipe, because if there would be a recipe, everybody would do it. So it's a bit like advertisements. Also, everybody wants to produce a successful advertisement, but in the end of the day, there are very few that are really successful. But nevertheless, one thing that is kind of sticking out is there must be, most of them are quite extreme somehow. I mean, and that's something I think that often goes viral, one way or other extreme. I mean, maybe not true for 100%, but for most cases. And yeah, that's maybe something that makes it special. Otherwise, it would not go viral. Okay.
And then, yeah, we have another
The next
question
one.
actually from Wilfred Lucas as well. His second
Okay.
question is, can we say that representations combine fantasy with reality, like how people combine a fantasy version of themselves with their true selves?
Okay, yeah, somehow yes, because especially when we speak now about social media, I mean, the idea, even in the news, the idea that the media is really representing the reality one-to-one will never happen. And even if there's the best intention from the media, it will not happen, because there's always some selections going on and some framing going on. But in case of ourselves, it's even more the case. So the fantasy, or you are kind of creating your own image. Many people have actually quite different online persona than maybe in real, while in other cases, it might be closer to each other. So in that sense, I think for many people, it might also be something projecting at least a bit, which they cannot do in real life.
All right.
Okay, then let's see the next.
And then, do representations and their effects, including emotions, make digital landscape and space more boundless, like common idea, or does it make it more bordered, considering the privacy laws that we have in place?
That's a difficult question, but I have the feeling generally, I would say the digital space gives us nevertheless more options. In that sense, it's a bit more boundless than let's say our life before the digital world. Just now, I mean, this is not a representation in that sense, but nevertheless a reminder how boundless we become in the digital world. I'm sitting now in South Korea, and it's 1 hour later, and you're sitting in the Philippines, and it feels like we're in the same place and in the same time. So I think general there's a tendency to become a bit, that everything becomes kind of wider and less bordered maybe. But yeah, sure, there are some restrictions also. Okay, then the next one
is how do representations in digital world impact on the social geography in the actual world? How about your thoughts on censorship and online surveillance?
Okay. I'm not a geographer, so I'm not sure what social geography really means. But anyway, I just try to make something out of that now. So for me, it's actually, that's why maybe I'm not fully aware what it means, but for me, it sounds like a bit two different questions. The first one sounds a bit to me like in how far the online and the offline the online might influence the offline kind of. I think that's the case, definitely. I mean, when we think about travel, for example, something I spoke short about in the presentation, we have already some very big expectations based on what we know from the media and very much online nowadays from Instagram and so on. And that certainly also influences our offline experience in the actual world and also our expectations. We already go for that particular thing, what we saw there, and we want to recreate that somehow. And we post nearly the same again, what this other person posted, kind of. So it really influences. The second one, censorship, online surveillance, not totally sure how it's related to the first one. In general, sure, it's a big topic. And I think in most, in case of censorship at least, in most of our society now, in most democracies, censorship is relatively limited. Let's put it in that way. Not that it's not existing, but it is relatively limited. Surveillance certainly exists. I mean, in different ways, particularly in Instagram and so on. There's a lot of so-called commercial surveillance. That means all these companies want to know everything about us. They want to know what we like, what we don't like, and then they can basically produce ads and target us. Yeah. Okay, let's look at the next one.
So I think that next two are connected. So I was wondering if you have come across the use of music and other olfactory or olfactory tools to project self-image or self-representation in social media. And the context of that is this is coming from the idea that self-image or self-representation is also a form of advertising, and audio has a huge impact on how we perceive the information.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. Honestly, maybe I read, but I don't remember now anything which is related to audio, but I would have to particularly search. And again, like before the holiday question, that's something maybe that might be worth to investigate, because I agree that audio probably plays an important role. Not that there's always audio, but audio is like in advertising. I also did research. Actually, most of my research is on advertising. Music very often plays the role of some nostalgic role, for example. It's kind of a cue, a reminder of some feeling we had in the childhood, or maybe when we had a relationship or whatever else it is. So in that sense, music can be very powerful, maybe even more powerful than some images. And I think in that sense, it's a very valid question. And but again, I did not come across any research, but most likely there is probably something, but I guess not too much. Otherwise, I would have come across it. But that's certainly something to pursue, I think. And the final comment is, yeah, I totally agree. It's kind of similar to advertising. And some people, you can really feel they advertise themselves. Other people maybe not so much, but some people are really all over the place and really promote themselves on a daily basis on their social media accounts.
Yeah. And then two more questions came in. The first one is, I was wondering if you were able to explore other forms of social media, such as dating sites, where self-representation is also a key factor, something that's very important also.
Okay. Actually, I did one study on dating sites. It's already some years back, but we looked at that time at something else. So in that sense, I don't have so much general information. What we looked at that time, it's maybe a bit unusual. We looked at the size of faces. That's the other type of research. There's actually research saying that the bigger the face is, that's more associated with men and intellectual abilities, and the smaller the face is, that's the women show more of the body basically than the man in pictures. And we evaluated that also in these dating sites, and yeah, not surprisingly, this was the case. Women, again, this is a stereotype that was even true in newspapers and so on, found in previous research. And it's not surprising in dating sites, it was even stronger because it goes back to this stereotype that women, again, as I mentioned it in the presentation, is more about beauty. And beauty is often not just the face, but also the body somehow. And that's why there's often more shown of the body, while in the case of men, it's more like a portrait shot very often. On average, again, it's we did, I think, nearly 20,000 pictures we analyzed. So it's not, if you look one by one, you might not realize it so much, but if you look at many, you realize there's a difference. But beyond that, I did not look at anything specific. But yeah, certainly, I mean, I read also, I reviewed also many papers on that area, and certainly dating sites are very interesting for self-representation. And maybe even more than social media, you certainly have to try to present yourself in a very positive light. But there's also research showing that some people present themselves in a too positive light, which is not good, because then you meet the person and you're very disappointed. So in that sense, you also have to be careful that you stay a bit with reality. I mean, it's sure you want to show your nicer side, but some people are really photoshopping themselves in a kind of strong way. And then when they have the first encounter, then might lead to some disappointment. Yeah.
All right. And then what are your tips for researchers who are interested in this topic, especially on the ethical aspect?
Okay. Anyway, it's a very wide topic, so I'm not sure now just body image or everything. I think the ethical aspects are very important ones, and that's an ongoing issue. And also with all these social media platforms, I think they improved also based on quite a lot of pressure on different areas. When it comes to hate speech and all these kind of issues, they improved. Even so, now we see also some backlash again. We will see what's going on with Twitter in the future and so on. But yeah, they did something, probably not by themselves, but based on some social pressure. And I think the situation improved, but there's certainly still more to do. And I think on a daily basis, there are new challenges. Like one thing I just mentioned briefly in this presentation is this kind of AI-generated images, these virtual influencers, and they're just starting, but this will become more and more. And the question is then in the future, will we still be able to differentiate? Actually, probably we will not be, because even now it's nearly impossible to differentiate. And similar to some people are suggesting in social media, if there's some photoshopping, it should be kind of marked. And similarly, it should be probably marked that this is not a real person. But some scholars argue, and there's actually also some research showing that even if you mark it and you write, oh, this is photoshopped, or this is not a real person, it seems images are stronger than text. So in that sense, people nevertheless kind of get in their head, and it's a bit hard to escape, actually. I think we got some new ones still.
Yes. So the question is self-representation inherent to most, if not all kinds of engagement in social media, especially on what is posted?
Okay, I agree with that. I mean, even if you don't post a photo of yourself, which is probably the most obvious self-representation, even if you just share a newspaper article, it's kind of a self-representation. I share the article because I want to communicate something. I mean, you probably don't think about it. You communicate something about yourself, but basically you do. And you can see this very strong. I give one example. When Donald Trump was still president of the US, I'm definitely not a fan of him. And I posted some critical articles, and I also liked some articles which are critical of him. And after a very short time, I got all the articles were critical of Donald Trump. So this algorithm of the social media is working very well, basically. But it also shows, it tells something about you. And maybe the audience doesn't understand it that much, but the platforms really understand it. They know, oh, you're this guy. That's why from now on, we only bombard you with this message, which is also dangerous, by the way. It's this kind of echo chamber or filter bubble that basically we sit inside, and then we feel, oh, our candidate will win. Everybody is in favor of this person. But then in the election, this candidate only gets 10%, because all my friends have the same feeling, but the majority of people have other feeling. But then we often get this distorted image actually in social media. So again, even if we share something or if we like something, it's kind of a way to self-represent yourself, even so it's probably not so obvious than sharing a holiday photo of ourselves or whatever achievements we had.
Yeah, and I think your answer also touched on the follow-up question, which I didn't see right away. So we'll
Yeah,
just go
that's
to the last question, and I think this is the final question that we can have for this session. And the question is, what are your thoughts on deepfakes and deliberate misrepresentation in social media?
Okay, yeah, that's an important question also. And again, something that will certainly increase and also becomes better and better. I mean, even now it's nearly impossible to differentiate, but in some years it's for sure really impossible to do. And I think that's really something these platforms have to find a way to stop it, because this can be really very dangerous, especially also for democracy and elections and so on. There might be some, I don't know, some deep fakes circulating of some candidates who says whatever nonsense. And even if later on it might be said, oh, it was not like that, it already reached so many people and they might not hear the other message that it's not true. So this can really lead to a lot of damage. So I hope it's again tough, and I mean, it's easy to criticize the social media platforms, and I think there is reason to do that. But I know it's sometimes also quite difficult for them actually how to deal with this issue and how to find out, since the techniques and the technical abilities become more and more sophisticated. But I think ideally there should be really something to try to stop that, because I think that's really dangerous.
Wow. So as we wrap up the open forum, I would like to thank Dr. Prieler for the time he has given us this afternoon to show our appreciation. The organizers of the ICGS 2022 would like to give a certificate of appreciation to our presenter. So the certificate of appreciation is given to Michael Prieler for sharing his valuable knowledge and expertise as the plenary speaker in the social media representations and emotions plenary session at the International Conference on Geographical Studies 2022 Emotional Geographies Passion in the Geographical, held virtually on November 10 and 11, 2022 at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Quezon City. Signed, Timothy James Cipriano, Ferdinand Francis Hermoso, the ICGS 2022 coordinators. Signed, Emmanuel Garcia, president of the PGS. Signed, Joseph Palis, chair of the UP Department of Geography.
Okay, thank you so much for having me today. And I hope the talk was interesting and you got out something of it. Okay, thank you.